views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey, time for you to see the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to journalists and photographers and filmmakers and writers. And sometimes we also talk to BronxNet access producers who are putting out really good programs. And this evening we are thrilled to have William Parris with us. He is the host of Legitimate Matters, and we'll find out how legitimate they are in just a moment. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Parris.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. I'm happy to be here.
Let's just talk a little bit about the background. You know, people know that BronxNet has the 4 channels, 67, which is the channel I'm on for 2 programs, and other people, of course. And then also 3 channels for access producers. And the whole idea is for Bronx people to make their own programs.
Right.
What made you say, hey, I ought to do this?
Well, Gary, my background is actually in hospitality. I've been in the
so that fits perfectly.
I've been in the hotel industry for 30 years, as a matter of fact, and I've opened 6 hotels as a sales and marketing director. And at one point, I had a radio show which was called Travel and Wellness Today, and having my own TV show was just a natural progression.
And then you, how old is Legitimate Matters, for example?
We launched the show in 2017. I actually started it, but did my first pilot in January 2017. And I want to point out that we have since won 3 awards.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're deserving of many more, but that's for another conversation. Give me the theme. Legitimate Matters. What made you say I ought to do this?
I feel that there are so many topics and there are so many issues that day to day people face, whether it's healthcare, whether it's financial, and trying to create a good life for yourself. But a lot of those topics that we cover, which I consider to be legitimate, are really not covered by mainstream media. I think that there's so much that we should be talking about, and Legitimate Matters is a platform to discuss those types of issues to help individuals make better decisions for their life.
Isn't it amazing? We've got 1.4 million
1.4.
people, and here's the very fundamental issues. I mean, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about mental health, and the other things that we're going to talk about.
Right.
And we still feel like nobody's talking about them. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Which really should be aside from development and all these other very important issues, this should be the topic, because if you want to solve the problems of a community, that's how you do it.
You have to begin with the community.
I hope this question is retrievable for you.
Okay.
What I have discovered after my years of being on BronxNet television is the programs I like best are the ones that I learn something.
Okay.
And I could tell you that a guest like you or others have brought something in, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. Have you changed? Have you learned something over the course of 2 years? Now let's just see, it's twice a month. 10:30 Sunday nights on Channel 68.
That's correct.
Right,
yes.
So make it up. But really, you know, what's it brought to you aside from all the great things you're bringing to the Bronx? What have you taken away from it?
Well, it's a great question. As a matter of fact, I found that my own personal development has really escalated since I've been doing the show, because I've had people on my show who have done the 7 stages of small business success. So I've talked about how to build small businesses. I've also talked about topics such as mental health, and then also Alzheimer's disease, which is my real passion.
Right. We're definitely going to get to that, as you know.
But I've learned so much just from the individuals that have been on my show, who bring to my show such a wealth of knowledge.
We have something in common, of course, hosting people from the Bronx who talk about all different things. It's an amazing place, right?
It is.
And people come in and they're working so hard, and they have so many things they're working on. They have passion for things like mental health and things like that. And everybody trying to say, you know what, we're going to do better. You know, we're going to. That's what I have found in my many years of being on TV. presumably that's what you're referring to.
It is, and I would also say that I don't think that the Bronx gets enough credit as far as one of the 5 boroughs, because the Bronx is a very vibrant.
To me, it's the only borough.
It's
but
a vibrant borough. There's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of community here. I consider it to be a great borough, and I'm proud to have lived here for the past 20 years.
You know what I find? This is to me a fundamental, core, fascinating discussion, because it defines life in the Bronx. And for 1.4 million people who are as diverse as anybody in the world, that's not so easy to do.
Right.
I find when I talk to Bronx people, if I walk into the deli, maybe in a neighborhood I'm not used to, and I don't really, that I feel like I know the people. There's a certain energy that we have, you know?
I agree.
An acceptance of diversity. Anyway, let's talk about this passion you have for Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
You have dealt with it, and we're going to show you a clip from Legitimate Matters that talks about it. But talk to me about how you got into the treatment of it, the understanding of it, and wanting, of course, try to affect the outcomes.
Absolutely. Well, to begin with, Alzheimer's disease affected my own family, and in short, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and my mother ended up being her caregiver. My mother was very determined to take care of her mother. She didn't want to place her in a nursing home. The end of that story is that the stress really was so intense for my mom that my grandmother actually survived my mother. And yeah, it was.
There's a switch.
Yeah, it was pretty sad, and it was sad because the stress for caring for my grandmother literally killed my mother.
Wow.
So I think that.
So it really it was a killer, but not for the most obvious reason that people would think, because of its effect of people around them.
But Gary, I want to point out, and this is really important for your viewers to understand, those that are in the Bronx, that Alzheimer's disease affects African Americans and Hispanics more than white. So African Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease, and Caribbean Hispanics are 1.5 times more likely. And I should also point out that this particular group are the least participants in the research and the studies, and caregivers becoming overwhelmed with the stress and passing away before
Has it happened in your family?
It has, not just in my family, but statistically speaking, it's common.
Is there a very simple, because we don't need to go into the long-term concept, but is there a simple explanation for why people of color are more greatly affected?
Well,
because that would start to get into the whole mystery of how to treat it and where it comes from.
Well, this is something that I've learned, and you asked me, what have I learned? That scientists are trying to understand it. What we can determine is that genes have a lot to do with how people develop Alzheimer's disease. They also believe that there are things that African Americans and Hispanics are more likely to develop, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease.
Well, that's a matter of record here in the Bronx.
Right.
For sure.
And these kinds of things actually have the potential to contribute. Okay.
I'm just going to mention, when I was growing up, they called it, they turned senile. Now we've at least got some definition.
Right.
And we're also making a distinction between Alzheimer's and dementia,
right,
which for the layman, so to speak, would say, isn't that the same thing?
They're not.
And they're not. Okay, we're going to show a clip of you interviewing somebody?
This is Dr. Christiane Rice, who is one of the scientists and also the associate professor of neurology and epidemiology at Columbia University's Taub Institute for the Aging Brain.
That's legitimate.
That is legitimate.
That's why it's a legitimate matter.
Right.
All right, let's take a look. Legitimate Matters.
This show is really about raising awareness specifically with African Americans. And but how does those numbers compare to Hispanics versus whites? And why is this something that African Americans and Hispanics in particular should really pay more attention to?
So African Americans have twice the risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to whites, and also the risk is a little bit higher compared to Hispanics. So Hispanics have about 1.5 the risk of whites, and African Americans have actually twice the risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to whites. So it really is particularly a particular concern in the African American communities. The reason why that is the case is something we really need to find out. We probably have some idea. We know that, for example, African Americans have a higher frequency of what we call vascular disease, which is diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, heart disease, and stroke. And we know that all these are increasing the risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Well, there it is, Legitimate Matters, and twice a month, 10:30 Sunday nights on BronxNet Television with William Parris. So what is the distinction between Alzheimer's and dementia? Many people would say, well, my mom or my father doesn't make any sense. Is there a difference? There is a difference, Gary.
Dementia is pretty much an umbrella, and under that umbrella there are different types of
dysfunction, if you will,
of development of brain disorder, and Alzheimer's is the most common. But under that umbrella, there are about 400 different types of dementia.
Well, before we run out of time, are we getting closer to solving it? To me, and not a medical person, an amateur in every way, somebody gets old, all the functions deteriorate. Their limbs don't work anymore, their muscles don't work, and so I would think it would just be logical that all the connections they used to make don't work. Am I off base here, or is that part of just the aging process?
No, actually you are off base, Gary. I have to
say.
I
would be. No, go ahead.
So
there's a disease of some sort.
No, there is a deterioration of certain cells of the brain, and that's the reason why people with Alzheimer's can remember things that go way back to childhood, but they don't remember, they lose their short-term memory. And a person that has dementia, if they forget something, like you and I might forget, I can't think of this, or what was I trying to remember? Where did I do this? But if it comes back, then that's pretty much normal. It happens to us all. But a person that has Alzheimer's disease, what they lose and what they forget will not come back. It does not come back.
Well,
yes.
So dementia gives you a chance to recover it. But Alzheimer's, I mean, now I've learned something.
Well, dementia actually, in any form, is a deterioration, and eventually it does lead to death.
Legitimate Matters, 10:30 every second Sunday on BronxNet Television, Channel 68. Talk to me about, for people who want more information, who want to connect with you, what do they do?
Well, people can go to my website, which is www.legitimatematters.com, and for all of our shows, and they can see any of our episodes on demand at YouTube. So you can just search Legitimate Matters, and we're there. And also my Twitter feed is Legitimate WCP. So it's Legitimate WCP. But also, if they are interested in really getting evaluations, I just want to point out that they can actually go to the Taub Institute for the Aging Brain, and that is they can call 212-305-2349. And for caregivers, they should reach out to Caring Kind, and that's in New York City at 646.
And the thing to do is contact you, and you'll point
Contact me. Reach out to me.
Listen,
I'll give
William
you all the
Parris,
information. I've got the information.
He's educating us left, right, and center. Thank you so much
Gary,
for your time.
thank you again.
Let's
I really appreciate it.
Let's get everybody to watch Legitimate Matters. And we are going to talk to an editor down in the city who wrote a tribute to a Bronxite who has passed, and it's a moving tribute, but also an important one for us to all acknowledge and remember. So we'll be right back.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and we are going to say hello to my good friend Jarrett Murphy. We are always happy to talk to Jarrett Murphy, but this evening a little bit of maybe a lot of sadness about the subject matter, but it's always good to talk to Jarrett. Jarrett Murphy is the editor of City Limits, and nice to have you with us, Jarrett. How are you?
Thanks very much, Gary. I'm doing okay. Thank you.
Good. So our friend, both yours and my friend, Heidi Hynes, passed away kind of tragically. She was kind of an iconic figure in a way. Iconic not because she was like rich and famous necessarily, but iconic because she epitomizes for me much of what like the best Bronx people are doing, and that is advocating for their community. You wrote a wonderful piece about her. Why don't you talk a little bit about what motivated you to say, and of all the people who go, this is somebody I want to acknowledge.
Yeah, well, Gary, Heidi passed away last week, actually I guess 2 weeks ago, at the age of 51.
Terribly sad.
And yeah, terribly sad. She had been fighting cancer for more than a year. She was the director for many years of the Mary Mitchell Center in the Crotona section of the Bronx. Before that, she was an organizer for the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition. And what she was just an amazingly energetic, positive, engaging, friendly, joyful voice that somehow harnessed all of that incredible human energy in the name of really expressing outrage at some of the injustices that people live with in the Bronx and elsewhere: poverty, ill health, racial discrimination. She also was an advocate on international issues around torture and treatment of immigrants. She was an anti-war advocate for many years, working with the Catholic worker, just a person who touched thousands and thousands of lives with her principle and her spirit, and someone who, managed to have and state senators at her memorial service, and all of them, I think, were actually equally personally grieved at her passing.
To me, it speaks to the best of Bronx advocacy because it was, you get a lot of people who advocate for issues and they put themselves in front and on camera and, it's partially about like kind of their energy. I hate to put it this way, but she flew under the radar mostly because she was so attached to those issues that you talk about and had passion for the issues always came first, and solving those issues came first, as opposed to certainly a self-aggrandizing or things like that.
No, and I think another thing, Gary, that she shares with the best advocates in the Bronx, and she really is a descendant of Mary Mitchell and Aston Jacobo and other of the organizers that really saved the Bronx during the worst days. I think there's a tendency for people to dismiss advocates as being sort of pessimistic or glass half full people. Right. And she was the antithesis of that. She was motivated by a belief that in fact there's tremendous potential in the world, and that the world can be a wonderful place, and that we all have a duty to try to seek that, not just for ourselves, but for each other collectively. So I think that's something that you see in the best of advocates, is that sense of, not that we're not talking about problems because we feel the world is destined to be this dismal place, whether it's the Bronx or anywhere else, but that we all have a chance to make it into what it ought to be, and that was clearly what motivated her.
You know what else is interesting to me? Because if you look at maybe the kids or families who utilize the services of Mary Mitchell Center, they all would say, well, we were really affected by her. But what I found striking through the process of her passing and the reaction of people like yourself and me and many others is that colleagues were really affected. It wasn't only the people that she served, because, again, without calling attention to herself, there was a real leader here by doing. I mean, maybe I'm re-emphasizing what I already said, but I think that really is the truth in this case.
I think so, and I think another thing is that, her sort of personality can't be discounted either. I mean, Heidi had a way of disarming people, even if they were her ideological opponents, even if there are people who, didn't really want to talk to her, who didn't want to give her what she came to get. Through her humor and kind of joy and kind of engaging personality, her infectious laugh, she was, I think, able to win a lot of people over, whether they were staffers or, folks from city agencies. I think that's what people kind of remember. I mean, just to get especially personal, I lost my dad this year, which was difficult, obviously, for all of us. But I have to say, I think upon learning the news of Heidi's death, my mom was more upset than about my pop, because this was such a shock, and also she just, even though she only met my mom a couple times, she was really, kind of infectious with her personality.
I don't think that I ever saw her without a smile on her face. I'm sorry. I have to just say that. I've always greeted her and was always happy, etc. Well, on that note, I'm proud of the fact that on Bronx Talk we've had many community leaders on, and I pulled up the show that we did with Heidi about the Mary Mitchell Center from 2010, so that's 9 years ago. And you'll see her young and vibrant and advocating like crazy. We're going to show you a clip of that. And it was my introduction to the Mary Mitchell Center. And you can see in this clip we're going to show that I was like, oh, you do all that? It's like there's no limit. So Jarrett, we'll take a moment here and take a look at Heidi Hynes from October 2010 on Bronx Talk on BronxNet Television. Let's take a look. Well, there she is, Heidi Hynes, doing what she did best, just telling about all the stuff that they had done over there. And Jarrett, what she talked about was the opportunity to give young people breakfast in the morning. And I think I was like, well, who does that? Like, are you getting it from somewhere? And she goes, no, we do it. And this was that spirit of standing up and representing and saying, I'm not giving it to anybody else to do. I'm gonna do it. So why don't we just give you a few moments to wrap up, offer your own words and words of many people who helped memorialize Heidi Hynes last week.
Well, I think, well, Gary, first of all, thanks for having me on. And second, I'd say what people have been saying is that, people have been given an example to follow, through her work and how she conducted herself, not just her advocacy, but how she dealt with people. I think a lot of folks are gonna, take that as their mission as best they can to try to carry on some portion of that, whether it's working on her issues of youth and healthy food and end to violence and war, or it's just in how you kind of conduct yourselves with people, trying to treat everybody as an incredibly precious resource. Yeah. That's the thing. What I'm going to take from it, and I think a lot of other people are going to do that too. It's an example, whether you knew her for 5 minutes or knew her as I did for 15 plus years, that you can take from it, and that's pretty powerful. I think she'd say something self-deprecating about that, but I think she'd be tickled by that.
Yeah, she would not be happy about us doing this. I'm sorry. But also that clip, for people who did not know her or know who she was, that says it all. A role model, somebody to follow. May she rest forever in peace, I guess, is really all we can say, huh?
Exactly.
Jarrett,
I'm glad I had a chance to know her.
Me too, and I'm glad you had a chance to do this on our program. Next time we'll wrestle about all the issues we usually talk about.
Yes, yes,
all right.
Exactly.
You be well, my friend. Thank you so much.
You too. Take care.
All right, there we go. That's Jarrett Murphy, the editor of City Limits. And the Bronx lost somebody who was really important. And as I said, she flew under the radar, so to speak. So anyway, good night. We'll see you next week for the Bronx Buzz. And Bronx Talk, we're going to talk about some artists, some kids who are making artwork and some other stuff. We also will have a council member coming on. See you next week. Goodbye.